All right, Shalom. Before I begin, I'd like to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai Bahashim, Racha Kodash. I'd like to say double honors to my teachers, the apostles, and the elders of Great Millstone, that rule well and teach well, the men whom I've learned this truth from. And I'd also like to say Shalom and salutations to the brothers out there of the hopeful elect that are preaching this word in truth and sincerity. All right, I'm the brother Shaquat from the branch of Great Millstone, Montreal, back with another lesson. And this lesson that I'm going to be getting into today, it's going to be a lesson centered around or going into and basically proving that sin is contagious, right? And what is sin? Sin is the transgression of the laws of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai. Sin is the transgression of the Heavenly Father, like it says in the book of 1 John, right? And what are the laws? The laws are rules and regulations that were set up by the Heavenly Father for the Israelites, the so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans to keep and maintain for their well-being, But if you would transgress those laws, there will be a judgment, But, and if you let sin basically run its course, it's going to be contagious, man. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that, other people are going to be influenced to rebel against the Heavenly Father, to rebel against the laws, because that's what you're doing, So before I begin, let me jump right here to the book of Psalms. That's 30. Yep, Psalms 37 and verse 35, because the reason for the chaos and the destruction of the planet Earth currently is because of sin. It's because sin has been allowed to basically grow its roots. That's why you also get in the book of Maccabees, where the scriptures speak about a particular root, a wicked root, named Antiochus or Antiochus, however you want to say it, that took root on the earth, And you're going to come to find out that that wicked root is actually a people, a nation of people. And that nation of people at that time were the Greeks, the Antiochus and them. They were Greeks. They were also Edomites, But once they've come, or they were on the scene, as soon as they came on the scene, wickedness and sin basically increased at an all-time high. Why? Because as rulers, you're supposed to have a particular job. You're supposed to set up particular rules and regulations, and those rules and regulations are supposed to be tailored to the scriptures. They're supposed to be based off the scriptures, the Bible, the laws of the Heavenly Father, But the so-called white man, the Edomites, they don't do that. They're actually adverse, They actually set up laws that are opposite to what the scriptures want, or what the Heavenly Father wants, Hence the condition of the earth right now, because sin has been allowed to run freely. Sin has been allowed to take root, Because as a ruler, you're supposed to be like, no, this is not supposed to happen. Because if you allow particular things to happen, or, particular things to run their course, that's going to yield fruits, It's going to influence people, right? So let's get this. Psalms 37 and verse 5. I've seen the wicked in great power and spreading himself like a green bay tree. Right, the wicked here are the Edomites, the so-called white race, right? And they're in great power, right? and they basically spread themselves like a green bay tree, meaning they've took root in the earth with that wicked mindset and that perverse mindset. All right. So this lesson that I'm going to be getting into today is going to be proving. Um, well, we already have a lot of evidence to what happens when you allow sin or transgression of the laws of the Heavenly Father to basically be justified, which brings chaos, you know? And that's what we're seeing right now. That's why people are depressed, you know? The earth is out of course, right? It's because of that. It's because of sin. Sin has been allowed. But there's accounts in the scriptures where the Heavenly Father encourages us and gives us examples to what to do to avoid that root of sin, to avoid sin from basically becoming contagious, you know, and that's by issuing out judgment. Um, so I'm going to start in the book of Esther, chapter 1 and verse 10, you know, one famous account, right? The rebellion or Queen Vashti's refusal. So this is Esther 1 and verse 10. On the seventh day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, and Abigtha, Zatar, and Carcass, the 7 chamberlains that served in the presence of Ahasuerus the king, to bring Vashti the queen before the king with the crown royal, to show the people and the princess her beauty, for she was fair to look on. But the queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment by his chamberlains. Therefore was the king very wroth, and his anger burned in him. Then the king said to the wise men, which knew the times, for so was the king's manner towards all that knew law and judgment, right? And this was basically the setting of this account was during a feast, because the king held a feast to all the provinces and the neighboring provinces around him, right? He basically invited a lot of people. Right? And there was a lot of people in attendance. So this act of rebellion from Vashti was in the eyes of many. You know? Men, women, children, and so on and so forth. Verse 14. And the next said unto him, and the next unto him was Karshina, Shatar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marcina, and Mahum, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, which saw the king's face, and which sat first in the kingdom. What shall we do unto the queen Vashti according to law? Right, so the king basically gave out a commandment in front of everybody to bring his wife, his woman, you know, and that commandment was probably said out loud, right? And the king is the top dog, for lack of better words, you know. So the queen refusing to come at the commandment of the king, which is the top dog, in front of everybody, that diminishes the king's power, you know, because it goes to show that the king is feeble and weak. He's, you know, he gets denied by a woman, you know. But if the king would have allowed that to just, you know, brush by, or to be brushed away without acting on it and issuing a judgment, then that entire scenario or that mindset would basically, you know, pollute his whole entire rulership, because people are going to look down to him. Not only that, but other women are going to be rebellious towards their men. and so on and so forth. Verse 15, it says, What shall we do according what shall we do unto the queen Vashti according to the law? Because she had not performed Salakia, because she had not performed the commandment of the king Ahasuerus by the chamberlains. And Malcolm answered before the king and the princes, Vashti the queen had not only done wrong to the king only, but also to all the princes and to all the people that are all in the provinces of the king Ahasuerus. For this deed of the queen shall come abroad unto all women, so that they shall despise their husbands in their eyes, when it shall be reported. The king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought in before him, but she came not. Likewise shall the ladies of Persia and Media say this day unto all the king's princes, which have heard of the deed of the queen. Thus shall there arise too much contempt and wrath. Right? So if they allowed this to just, not allowed, but if they basically brushed this off and be like, whatever, this would actually affect his whole rulership, like I mentioned earlier, you know? And a lot of women would basically see that and get an power trip and be like, oh, she did it, I'm going to do it too. I'm going to be rebellious to my man, you know? But if that's what would have happened if this behavior did not go checked, But the king made sure that this behavior was checked, which put a silence to all the other women and men, that would look at the king as weak, right? But the point being is that if that was allowed to fester, guess what? That would have been contagious, and that mindset would pollute the minds of many, and would have brought chaos, right? So this is rebellion, right? Which could also be synonymous with sin, right? But these are not Israelites, but it's still edifying, right? Rebellion is also synonymous with sin. It could be synonymous with sin, That's why the Lord also made reference or noted that rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, man. So rebellion is like sin, right? And if you would have allowed this act of rebellion to go unchecked, then it would have been contagious and polluted the entire kingdom of Ahasuerus and his subjects, right? So that's one account, right? And that's why often in the scriptures say for us to basically issue judgment in front of others, when sin has occurred. Why? So that others may see and fear and not do the same act that was done and judgment was brought upon it. All right. So I have a few accounts here, 4 different kinds of accounts that go into that, that show that sin is supposed to be cut off right away after, through judgment. That's how sin is cut off right away, because when it's done, that person has to receive a judgment, and that judgment has to be done in front of people, for the men, women, and children, so that they can see the fruits of that sin is death, right? If you do that sin, you're going to die, depending on what sin it is, right? So this is Deuteronomy 21 and verse 18. If a man have a stubborn and rebellious son, which will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and that when they have chastened him will not hearken unto them, right? So this is also ties into rebellion, Verse 19, then shall his father and his mother lay hold on him and bring him out unto the elders of his city and unto the gate of his place, And they shall say unto the elders of the city, This our son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. And all the men of the city shall stone him with stones that he die. So shalt thou put evil away from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear. Right. So this is what cuts away sin right away, is judgment that's brought upon an individual that has committed a sin, but that has to be done in front of people so that they can see and fear the Lord Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. You know, because it's not a light thing to witness somebody just get stoned to death in front of you. You know, that's a very graphic image, man, and not savory. You know, but if a person sees that, they'll be like, yo, I do not want to be like that guy. I do not want to do whatever he did, so I'm going to avoid it. And that's how you cut off sin, you know, from Israel right away before it springs up. You know, because if nothing were to happen to that stubborn and rebellious child and he was allowed to do whatever he wanted to do and basically not get judged for it, what would happen? Others will look at that example and be like, yo, shit, I could be rebellious too. I could be stubborn too. Let me be like that because nothing's going to happen to me, you know? So this is Deuteronomy 13 and verse 1. It says, If there arise among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and giveth thee a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder come to pass, whereof he speak unto thee, saying, Let us go after other gods, which thou hast not known, and let us serve them. Thou shalt not hearken unto the words of that prophet, or the dreamer of dreams, for the Lord Yahweh your power proveth you to know whether you love the Lord Yahweh your power with all your heart and with all your soul. Ye shall walk after the Lord Yahweh your power, and fear him, and keep his commandments, and obey his voice, and ye shall serve him and cleave unto him. And that prophet or that dreamer of dreams shall be put to death, because he has spoken to turn you away from the Lord Yahweh your power, which brought you out of the land of Egypt, and redeemed you out of the house of bondage, to thrust thee out of the way which the Lord Yahweh thy power commanded thee, and to walk in. So shalt thou put evil away from the midst of you. Right? So if a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, someone that says they had a vision or had a dream about a revelation of something, you know, comes to you and basically says, yo, you know, presents it to you and says, let's go follow other gods, that person is supposed to be put to death, because that's evil. You telling us to go serve another god when we have Yahweh and his son Yahweh Shai. You know, that's the ultimate act of rebellion, man. You know, to turn your back against the Heavenly Father, man, and serve and worship other gods. That's the first commandment, man. Right? So you're encouraging people to basically sin. Well, if you do that, you're supposed to be put to death in front of people. And guess what? People shall fear, and evil is going to be put out from among the people. Nobody's going to try to pull a stunt like that. All right? So let's go from there. Deuteronomy 19 and verse 15. It says, If one witness shall not rise up against a man for any iniquity, or for any sin, in any sin that he sinneth, at the mouth of 2 witnesses, or at the mouth of 3 witnesses, shall the matter be established. If a false witness shall rise up against any man to testify against him that which is wrong, then both the man between whom the controversy is shall stand before the Lord Yahweh, before the priest and before the judges, which shall be in those days. And the judges shall make diligent inquisition. And behold, if the witness be a false witness, and had testified falsely against his brother, then shall ye do unto him as he had thought to have done unto his brother. So shalt thou put the evil from among you, and those which remain shall hear and fear, and shall henceforth commit no more any such evil among you. And thine eye shall not pity, but life shall go for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, and foot for foot. Right? You know? So you lying and being a false witness, man, against your brother. You're supposed to be put to death in front of people. Because that's you're lying. Thou shalt not lie, man. You know, being a false witness is a lie. So if you're put to death, guess what? That's going to remove evil and uproot or chop off before it even starts to root sin and iniquity or evil early from among the people, right? And the people are supposed to see this judgment and be like, yo, I do not want to be a false witness. I shouldn't be lying because I know that there's repercussions to lying or falsely witnessing against somebody, man. All right? You know, and the judgment you get is basically what? It's that same judgment that you falsely accused the person for. You know, that you were expecting that person to get. Okay? So let's go from there to Deuteronomy 22 and verse 23. It says, if a damsel, which is a young woman, that is a virgin, that word virgin there is bathwala, which is an unspotted woman, a pure virgin, woman that has not been touched, right? It says, if a damsel that is a virgin be betrothed or promised unto an husband, and a man find her in the city and lie with her, a man found her in the city and grabbed her and raped her, then ye shall bring them both out onto the gate of that city, and ye shall stone them with stones that they die. The damsel, because she cried not, being in the city, and the man, because he had humbled his neighbor's wife. So shalt thou put away evil from among you. Right? So the judgment that you're supposed to issue out is death. They're both supposed to be stoned. Why? Because the woman, she didn't cry. You know, you're promised to somebody, but you submitted onto the man that's raping you, knowing that you are supposed to be marrying somebody else, or you're promised to somebody else, right? So she's going off by doing that. She's supposed to scream out for help, you know, and if she did scream out, she would have been justified. And then the man, you know, obviously because he's committing adultery, that woman is already promised to another man, and he's breaking wedlock. Not breaking wedlock, but he's basically taking someone's possession, man, and that's wrong because she's already promised to somebody, right? Hey, man, you know, so that's pretty much it. Sin is contagious, all right? I want to say, call Halayim La Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai Ba'ashem Machakodash. You know, double honors to my teachers, the apostles, and the elders of Great Millstone, and shalom and salutations to the Allah.